In World War II, Poland got wrecked. So I have decided to challenge myself by seeing just how powerful I could make Poland in 1936. But how am I doing this? Well, I'm not going to be doing it through the use of min-maxed infantry or tank divisions, but with cavalry only. That's right, these guys. To see just how successful I am, stick around to the end, and don't forget to drop a like, because it massively inflates my ego. However, before we dive into this challenge, we should probably set out some ground rules. Number 1. No other land units are allowed but cavalry, and the templates of the cavalry are just cavalry. There will be no support battalions, and no excess battalions that don't go nay-nay. Number 2. The tiniest amount of air is allowed, because cavalry alone are absolute rubbish. Trust me on that, because I did originally try to do this without air, thinking I was better than everyone else, and then I got humbled by the Soviets. And finally, number 3, the most important, I have no third rule. But only 2 rules sounds a bit off, and I feel like will look weird on the screen, so the third rule is that there has to be 3 rules. Now that that is dealt with, all I can ask of you now is to sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Okay, so we all already know that cavalry is pretty bad in this game, but I have a plan that will at the very least make cavalry feasible and Poland incredibly large. And this plan involves a super specific branch of the focus tree that you can only get with a certain DLC. The focus tree that I am on about starts with the focus Assemble the Regency Council, and is then followed by the focus Fulfill the 5th of November Act. The culmination of these 2 focuses basically allows me to pick one of 3 leaders, and the leader that we want is called Pavel Bermond Avalov. Yes, this guy, but why do we want him? Wow, number 1, I like his hat, and number 2, he gives a flat 15% increase to both cavalry attack and cavalry defense. With these bonuses, we are at the very least going to have cavalry that are somewhat like infantry. Then, by working our way through this focus tree, I can obtain large amounts of territorial expansion to help bolster not only my manpower reserves, but also my economy through the many military and civilian factories I will obtain from my neighbours. That is the plan that has been thought out, so now all that is left to do is put this plan into action. And putting the plan into action is exactly what I did. Now I'm going to glide over getting Pavel because, I've already explained how to do that, and instead I'm going to take you to the first focus that actually offers us some new land. Here it is, Demand Lithuania. Now surprisingly enough, this focus lets us eat up the entirety of Lithuania, and I'm going to be honest with you all, I do have a minor gripe with focuses like this, because they just give you all this free land, and in my head I'm thinking, if I was a Lithuanian, would I want to be eaten up by Poland? Not really. So I'm just thinking, realistically, the chances of this actually happening aren't all that realistic. But hey, I ain't complaining because it just lets me get free land for absolutely no reason. I was now hindered by the size of my army, so while I waited for troops to train, I completed some economic focuses and created a spy agency. Now this was my first time using any DLC, but I must say, La Resistance is currently my favourite, because when I see that I've created a 100% network, I have no idea what creating a 100% network does, but when I see it, it just makes me feel so cool and powerful and like I'm a pro or something. Okay, that's enough yapping. My next areas of territorial expansion were now in Slovakia and the remaining Baltic states, and after gobbling them all up, I now had 87 factories. This wasn't an amazing number by any standards, but considering I had originally somewhere around 26 factories in the beginning of the game, I'm definitely happy with our current standings. Now all that was left of this fairly powerful tree is focuses that give us cores on the lands in Germany and the Soviet Union, so I strategically chose to give up Danzig to the Germans to allow me to hyper-focus on the USSR. However, the USSR would not allow me to fully prepare for our war, as only around 30 minutes of gameplay later did they declare on me. All was not lost though, as I had managed to build a couple hundred planes that I could use to defend my troops and make sure that my troops are at the very least fighting in green air. And now, as usual with these challenges, it was the waiting game, in order to whittle the USSR down, gradually weakening them both in terms of manpower and stockpiled equipment. Or at least that is what I had hoped to happen, as the Soviets managed to pierce my southern lines and make a large push across my southern plains. And if you didn't know, plains are really hard to defend, because there is no negative multiplier from the terrain. So once the Soviets managed to get some momentum behind that push, my cavalry, that a large portion had been force deployed to try and patch this up, were just eventually getting pushed back further and further. But you see, the Soviets had made a mistake and forgotten that Cass is king. So I positioned my far superior fighters and close air support over this breached region and attempted to encircle the overextended Soviet troops. And I attempted this to a great success. The fact that these troops were now encircled means that they could therefore be easily destroyed. This means that I had not only shortened the front line, but I had simultaneously thickened my side of it. This means that I could do very easy pushes against their front line, piercing it and cause more encirclements, destroying more and more Soviet troops as the war goes on. Remember, the key to this game is to encircle and destroy. Otherwise, you are never truly weakening your enemies in the long term. The victories I had were thankfully not only in the south, because I had managed to pierce the northern line as well. And the piercing of this northern line led to a very large push up to Leningrad, eventually allowing me to take the city and have further encirclements and further destruction of enemy divisions. Odessa also fell, and the reason why I feel the need to tell you guys about this is solely to highlight the stupidity of the AI. While I was getting closer and closer to encircling this entire region on the Romanian border, the USSR didn't feel the need to evacuate its troops and redeploy them along the main line, but to instead choose to funnel more troops into this region through the local port, which, once I had taken, trapped the Soviets, allowing me to kill more and more and more of them than I normally would have been able to. In summary, even though the AI can sometimes be good at the game, most of the time they're pretty rubbish. And that was pretty much the Polish-Soviet War. I alternated between encirclements, battle plans and forming collaborative governments until they eventually capitulated. However, in the peace deal I made the stupidest mistake of my life. Sure, I took everything on the mainland, because I'd conquered them, it was my right, I seized their navy, all was looking good. But stupidly enough, I forgot to take one tiny little island by Alaska. It had no civs and no mills. It had no value to me. However, because the USSR still technically existed, I could not release their lands that I did not have a core on as a puppet, because it would just force me to give the land back to the USSR. Oh my god. The amount of manpower and equipment I was now spending on garrisoning this was ridiculous. And if you're thinking, Hermit, why don't you just naval invade them? I couldn't, because yes, I'd capitulated them, but they still had a medium-sized army, and when you put a medium-sized army on like 2 tiles, naval invasions are just not happening anytime soon. Out of anger and the fact that the Germans had my claimed land, I chose to prepare to go to war. However, this was the second worst mistake of my life. My original air force completely destroyed the Soviet air force, so I thought it could withstand the German Luftwaffe. However, the Germans had spent the last few years producing only high quality planes, so not only did I lose in the air, but I got completely dominated instead. And what's worst is that somehow the Germans had built up an army that was not 500 divisions large, not 600, but 700 divisions, and they weren't even on scraping the barrel yet. I do not understand this game sometimes. I do genuinely think that in the late game, the AI nations and your own nation should be limited on the amount of divisions it can place down, because not only does it slow the game and bug the game out a lot, but when I'm just looking at a wall of 800 German troops, because I'm the only one with a decent land border to them, I'm just thinking to myself, how on earth am I going to win this when I'm using only cavalry? Anyway, if you couldn't tell from my previous vibe, the Polish-German war was not looking good. I also forgot about the Uzbekistan region and Turkey border, so I did get pushed up to Stalingrad, but to be fair, that was just me being silly, so I couldn't really blame the game for that one. The same also goes up by Finland, as I forgot that Norway, who was invaded by Germany, borders the USSR, who was invaded by me. So I got invaded through there, and everything was just going terribly. And unfortunately, that was the end of this run. My air force and cavalry was simply no match for a late game Germany. And it also didn't help that the Allies did absolutely niche regarding the naval invasion of Italy, Normandy, Norway. They did nothing. All they did was get the Turkish on their side, and then the Turkish capitulated. But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope to catch you all in my future videos. I have no idea what my future video is going to be yet, but it may be something to do with Russia.